Welcome back, my friends, to the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. Each week, I'm sharing stories from my path and using the power of conversation and collaboration with my many great guests. Together, we chart a course toward understanding, bridging divides, and fostering a community where wisdom prevails over discord. Friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. The only good thing about a bad attitude is we have the ability as individuals to change it. For me, it starts with gratitude and personal accountability. I am so incredibly grateful that you have taken the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Please remember to subscribe and share the DTH podcast with your network of friends. If you would like to support the show, check out the Support Us page on the D-Rate the Hate website. With that, my friends, let's get to it. Friends, today we're doing something a little bit different. We are stepping into the world of classical music, a world filled with passion, dedication, and the pursuit of perfection. But it's also a world that can be riddled with intense pressure and toxic environments that can lead even the most talented musicians feeling inadequate. I'm thrilled to have with me as my guest Mary Beth Bryant, a certified Suzuki Method cello instructor who has dedicated her life to teaching and nurturing the next generation of musicians. Mary Beth is no stranger to the challenges that come with the territory. With extensive training under the internationally acclaimed cello pedagogue Irene Sharp in San Francisco, she's helped countless students achieve their dreams, with many of them earning full scholarships and admission into prestigious conservatories. But what really sets Mary Beth apart is her passion for communication, both musically and professionally. She believes that the most important quality in a musician isn't just technical skill, but the ability to communicate effectively. And that's what we're diving into today. In this episode, Mary Beth opens up about the darker side of classical music, the stories of students who have faced degrading and demoralizing comments from their teachers, leading to feelings of inadequacy and in some cases even addiction and suicide. It's a tough reality, but Mary Beth brings hope and actionable advice to the table. We're going to talk about why it's crucial to teach children that mistakes are okay and that they don't define who they are as musicians or as people. We'll also explore the fascinating parallels between music and communication. Mary Beth shares how active listening, curiosity, and emotional regulation are not just essential skills in life, but also keys to thriving in music. And of course, we'll be wrapping up with some practical tips for parents and teachers on how to create a safe, supportive environment that fosters growth and well-being for young musicians. So if you're ready to dive into an eye-opening conversation that's packed with wisdom, heart, and a whole lot of actionable insights, stick around, my friends. You're not going to want to miss this one. And with that, here we go. Mary Beth Bryant, thank you for joining me on the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I'm very grateful to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Mary Beth, when I received your initial email and you're reaching out through the D-Rate the Hate site, it was funny because you were the one that brought up, I'm not sure that you would want to speak with a classically trained cellist, and exactly, you're probably wondering why I'm reaching out, but as soon as you brought up the idea, the pressure that so many within the, especially like classically trained instrumental, classical music, or classical musicians, feel, and then the things that they sometimes do as a result of that pressure and why they feel the way that they feel and whatever. It really, it hit me in the field. It made me think about things that I had never thought about before, in a world that I'm completely unfamiliar with.
Yeah.
But then you talked about how you had just been to the Braver Angels convention, which I was recently part of and spoke at, and how much you loved what you saw there, and how you would like to introduce the way that, we do things, and then other people that I work with in these spaces, these mindset and depolarization spaces. And if only we could bring together those methods to help the people in the world of classical music and classical musicians. I really thought it was a beautiful concept. So that was maybe a long way to introduce why I have you here today, Mary Beth. But I am so grateful that you came on to join me today.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. I actually have got a story that can kind of illustrate the sadness and the toxicity, but I have a solution. I think your podcast is a wonderful solution. I think Braver Angels has a lot of unbelievable ideas that could transform this field. So I had a student go to a conservatory. I actually had two students, and both, unfortunately, were sad stories. But one is, he went to his teacher, and, he's playing, and each week, and my student would keep in touch with me, and he said his teacher would say to him, I don't really know why you're trying, because all of the other freshmen are so much better than you. And I thought, maybe he's exaggerating. Maybe he's a little sensitive that week. And then I heard stories from other students from that studio, and I thought, golly, this is really prevalent. This is more common than I thought. And I decided to go up and visit one lesson, and the day before his lesson, where he was in school, his teacher said to him, your old teacher's coming, but she's going to be really disappointed in hearing you, because you haven't improved at all for the 4 years that you've been here. And what that teacher actually was doing was a strategy, in my opinion, to motivate him to practice. And unfortunately, it worked. And that happens not with every teacher, obviously. There are plenty of amazing teachers who are motivating without that threatening toxicity. But that, in this field that we're in, it's so cutthroat. And, if you're a fraction of a millimeter off, you're out of tune with your left hand. If your bow is kind of not really the correct spot on the string with the correct speed and the correct weight, you're going to crack. And that could mean, maybe you don't get an audition. Intonation is just, you have to be so neurotic to be in tune. And on top of that, this field is not reflected pay-wise, in my opinion, the way it should, but we chose to go into it, so that's our choice. Mm-hmm. But it's also filled with these mentors, I say in quotes, there are some mentors who are so gross because they know that actually motivates the student to improve. And when they say, there are other students better than you out there, they say, I don't want to be like, I want to be the best one. So they train them to constantly be comparing themselves to others instead of themselves and improving on their own. So that's kind of why I'm here. And I had one other story. I had another student go to a conservatory, and unfortunately he started, I think, I'm not really blaming the school setting, but, he started using very hard drugs at the school, and he ended up overdosing and passing away in 2022. So there is some congruency with just this. There is some toxicity in this field that I really want to try to clean out. And I think it starts with little kids in the beginning, showing them that mistakes are okay and you are not your mistake, and you actually have to make mistakes. And that's the only way you learn. And I teach the Suzuki Method, which is and every child can. We assume every child can play an instrument, every child can learn, which is true. Okay. Everyone goes on a different path. Some students go faster, some students go slower. But we really want to influence the children that music is fun, music is joy, and music is discipline. But music is not, that kid is better than you, so you need to try harder. That is not what music is. Sure. And I feel like that kind of converses into conversations too. And that's where it bleeds into conversing too. Like why sometimes conversations don't always go well, because there's this power play. So that's kind of why I really have this mission.
Sure. No, and I think that's a very it's a very noble and worthy mission. I mean that anytime we see people struggling, Mary Beth, anytime we see people hurting, we as human beings, we should strive to figure out a way to help them if we have that ability, right?
Yeah.
And there is, this is one of the things that I talk about so much in business, in what I do for my regular career, and what I do with this podcast, and what I do with my work with the Braver Angels and the Pro Human Foundation, and the other organizations that I've been privileged enough to speak with or speak at, and is every mistake is an opportunity for learning.
Yes.
Yes. And if we do nothing but constantly beat people up, and in fact, I believe so much in that. I like write it on the front of my notebooks and stuff like that. Just the EMI, every mistake is an opportunity for learning.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And I try to make sure that people understand that, because when I talk so much about personal accountability and personal responsibility and our ability to choose our response to different things that are outside of our control, and the personal accountability piece, accountability to me, Mary Beth, means I can recognize where my shortcomings are, and I can use that not necessarily to beat myself up, and when we allow people to beat themselves up for their mistakes, they often do not learn the right way.
Yes, exactly.
But if they can recognize where they failed in a certain circumstance, or where they made a mistake, where they messed up, and use that as the motivation, not necessarily because this guy is better or that gal's better, or this guy plays the trumpet better than I do, or that cellist does much better with their bow and hold, whatever it is. And I'm speaking completely out of school here, because I don't know. I mean, the music world is very far from my wheelhouse, and anybody that's ever tried to hear me play an instrument could vouch for that. but people is what I do, and I see people doing that same thing, and bringing it, from your world, and telling me these painful stories about, not only the toxicity of these people, and maybe those people have the best of intentions, Mary Beth, but you and I both know that intentions are often the worst thing when it comes to trying to make real progress, right?
Right. Yeah, I was thinking as you were talking about mistakes, I had a 9-year-old student, and she's really sweet, and she came in and she was playing something for me, and she couldn't get it on the first try. And I think she's used to getting things instantly with almost every subject. But with cello, it's pretty complex, when you're learning something new. And I saw the tears falling, and I thought, wait a second. It's you just looked at this piece of music for the very first time. What's going on? And she goes, it's so hard. And I said, is it hard or is it new? And she said, it's hard. And I was like, okay, well, it's also new. And we broke it down, and she learned it, and she got better. And I said, I want you to remember this. It feels that hard and challenging thing. I call that feel the blurn. And I didn't make that up. I got that from Greg Goodhart. So when you are really struggling and you're learning something and it's painful and you're kind of annoyed, I say feel the blurn. Because when you do a push-up and you're on that 10th push-up, well, for me it's like 5th one, and it's really hard, that's where you're building the muscle. And
Sure.
you don't want to stop when it's easy, because you're not building any muscle and you're not learning. And I never really want anything to be too easy, because if it's too easy, why am I here? You don't need me. And eventually I really want my students to be able to teach themselves. But it took a while, but now she's at a point where she makes a mistake. She kind of gets annoyed, but she doesn't cry anymore. So it's a skill that I think I have some regrets with my student who passed away, that I wish I had the knowledge I have now to bestow upon him. Maybe he still would have chosen to do what he did. But I see that trend now with my students who get into addiction, that the second they make a mistake, they get so mad and they have such high emotions and they can't deal with them. And so I feel like if I can really do the best I can with what I know at the youngest age possible, show them mistakes are funny, mistakes are inevitable, you have to make them. And if you're not making them, you're not learning and you're not getting better, and it's too easy and it's boring. So
Well, that's right. That's right. And so I want to dive a little bit deeper into that, the regulation of emotion and how important that is, because anybody who's listened to this podcast very long knows that I quite often say, we should never allow our emotions to dictate our actions, which I know is much, much more difficult to do than it is to say. And for a lot of people, and I've also said the thing, I don't want everybody to become these emotionless automatons just running around void of emotion. But the idea of not allowing our emotions to dictate our actions is at least for my life experience, Mary Beth, has been, I know from my personal experience from growing up and dealing with certain things as a young child, and then being bullied, and then getting into a lot of very ugly and in a lot of ways violent situations as I grew up and become a young adult, and then now into where I'm at in life now. Watching myself and looking back in retrospect, those emotional situations, when I allowed my emotions to dictate my actions, now all of a sudden the lessons I'm learning are strictly out of typically pain or some kind of injury or having to pay for something that I have now broken or whatever. The gist of what I'm saying, though, is I was making constant bad decisions based on misguided emotions on things over which I had no control.
Right.
And so when I think of that, and when I think of my young daughter now and how she'll get frustrated when she's trying to do something, and one of the things that I'm always saying to her is, let's not get mad about this. Let's try to learn and get better. Kind of like what you're saying, right? Yeah. But the thing about that is, and I think too many people, especially when they're doing something, they're stepping outside of their comfort zone. They're trying something new for the first time, like your young student. Yeah. She's looking at something and she's automatically going to the fact that, hey, I am talented. I am more talented than I am being told that I'm more talented than this person, but now I'm messing this up. Yeah. So I'm going to assault myself. Basically, in that I am going to beat myself up for a failure that's not really a failure because of the way that she has been conditioned. I think so much of this it's painful. It hurts to see people do things like that. Yeah. And I think you're absolutely on the right path when you're telling your students now, and certainly, you can't undo what's been done with former students. But the beauty of what you're doing now and trying to incorporate into your lessons, how great is that?
Well, thank you. Another podcast I heard, it was the Braver Way podcast. I can't remember the two women, but they were discussing abortion. And it was one of the most beautiful illustrations of how discussions can go. Both of them are, in my opinion, I call people like book 1 through 10 in communication. Like there's Suzuki books, book 1 is Twinkle. Book 10 is a concerto, the most professional piece you could play. I thought they were book 10 and how they were communicating. And even still, they were acknowledging, oh, my heart is beating a little faster. I'm feeling defensive. Like that is unbelievable to say, okay, hold, I just have to take a step here. My heart is racing. My heart is going faster here. But they were calm. They didn't interrupt each other. They were listening. They were acknowledging. And I think of conversing like chamber music. So if you can, and we've talked about Daryl Davis before too, and I'm sure he's my hero, but I know he would agree with this too. When you're playing with other musicians, you have to match their tempo. So their speed, you have to match their timbre, their tone, their intonation where they are. And I'll just be really nerdy for 1 second. if you want to play two pitches, okay, and I know you said you know nothing about music. I'll try my best to just make it level one here. There's
Please
two
do.
pitches. Let's say the D, you have to play a D and an F sharp. To be in tune, if you want to be in tune with the D, you have to, what was in tune on the F sharp, you have to lower the F sharp. You actually have to make the pitch lower to be in tune with the D. It's a mathematical thing. That's as far as I can go. I can't even explain it. But when we are speaking with others, we have to calibrate to them a little bit, and we have to be able to match a multitude of things with them. And listen, anyways, that podcast, it felt like they were playing stunning chamber music with each other. And I've played music before, and I've been this person. I'm playing really loud. I want to show off. No one else I can't hear anyone else because I have an ego trip, or vice versa. You know, people aren't listening to my intonation, so I cannot at all be in tune with them. So I just think the parallel of listening to others is so great with communication. But what you were saying about your daughter, you know, when she gets mad, I actually like to say, get mad, stop your foot. Yeah, that's annoying that we missed that. And I do feel like students need to be guided through that. Like they can't just, you know, they can feel their emotions later, but I think they do need to be taught that you can have that really big feeling, and then you can take a breath, and then you can, you know, come back to it and try again. Sure. Because there was an example. My husband is a phenomenal listener, but after I started learning these listening, acknowledging, and perspective and pivoting and stuff skills, it has made me really tune into when I'm not being acknowledged. And one of my old students texted me that he had, I'm making it sound like I have so many students with problems. I really don't, but he texted me that he was on his way to rehab. And though I was so glad he was on his way to rehab, I was with my husband. I said, oh my gosh, you know, he's on his way to rehab. This is sad. And he said, well, good that he's going to rehab and he's getting help. I just needed to be acknowledged that I was sad about it, that I thought he was doing better than he actually was. And so I feel like, you know, when you're making a mistake, you're annoyed, you're frustrated, you think I thought I was smarter than that. You know, you let all those things come out, and then just do it again. Try again. You have new knowledge.
So from your experience then, Mary Beth, where do you think, or I guess the emotional regulation, the struggles with different interpersonal things. I mean, there are very strong parallels, and I love the way that you kind of explained the you know, two people playing instruments together, and how that is very similar to the important elements of a strong and you know, cohesive conversation. Yeah. So with those two things being, you know, very similar or running very, very parallel to each other, why do you think that so many people in the field that you are in struggle in that part of, I guess, part of life, part of their interpersonal skills or whatever? What do you, from your experience, what have you found is a commonality in this for a lot of these folks?
Okay, so I hate to throw classical musicians some shade. I don't think it's just classical musicians. I was thinking back, the first time I was taught listen, acknowledge, pivot, perspective was 3 weeks ago. So I'm 42 and I was just taught that. And now my mind and my brain have completely been transformed. And I'm thinking, if I've always had a desire to learn how to communicate more effectively. So I think I knew, you know, sort of how to listen. I wasn't great at it, but we aren't taught that in elementary school. We aren't taught that in high school or college. And then I think, you know, I've heard a lot of people get their financial skills from their parents. I think a lot of people get their communication skills from their parents as well. And if their parents were not trained, if there was a lot of yelling, they just continue that cycle. My father actually was a very angry person. And so I didn't yell. I would just kind of like bottle it up on the inside. And my husband is a very kind and open person. So he really did help me learn how to communicate effectively. But I think that the field is so competitive for us. The pay is not commensurate with how hard we work. And so there's just kind of probably a frustration with that. But I'm sure it's common in a multitude of fields. Like, I don't know if you ever notice sometimes when you're having a conversation with someone, they have been talking, in my opinion, they talk at me for 20 to 30 minutes. There wasn't one question that they had asked you, or in my situation, it happens fairly often. I do find that I'm a question asker, maybe more so, except for when I was at Braver Angels. I was completely mystified within 5 minutes of meeting someone. They didn't just ask me a question, they asked me a really, really good question. And I just think people don't know that that's a really important quality, that you should know how to ask questions. But if there should be a curiosity there. And I think that the main thing is there's not a curiosity with a lot of people. And I think there's fear when you come across as saying, I don't know something, or I have doubt about this, I want to learn more. You look weak. I think that was taught to us. Do you think that's true? I don't know.
Well, I think I want to approach that in a little bit different way. I don't know that it was taught, and I can only speak for myself. It was never taught to me that asking questions was a weakness or would be perceived as a weakness. But I can certainly see in other people that I've had conversations with how they could think so.
Yeah.
I do want to echo how beautiful it is, working in the world that I do with Braver Angels and a lot of the people that run in these depolarization circles and this whole depolarization space. The genuine curiosity that people have to really learn who we are as human beings before we try to pass judgment on why we believe what we believe.
Yeah.
The importance of that cannot be in any way overstated. I mean, it is such a value. I mean, I think back to a conversation or a couple different conversations I had way back early in my podcasting. I don't know if you want to call it career or whatever you would call this, but my friend Michael Ashford, for whatever reason that his book escapes me right now, but it's about having I think it is, may I ask you a question, but I'd have to go back and look, but Michael Ashford, absolutely beautiful human being, but he talks about how important it is to have these conversations, but the follow-up question, that's his podcast name, is the Follow-Up Question Podcast.
Oh, I'll have to look that up.
So if anybody hasn't checked out Michael Ashford or the Follow-Up Question Podcast or his work, he's a 2-time TEDx speaker. And then obviously my friend Monica Guzman with Braver Angels and her book. I never thought of it that way, and the importance of having curious conversations, right?
Yeah.
And then, and I'm probably just, people are going to say, oh, now he's just name dropping. But my friend David Brooks from the New York Times, in his book, How to Know a Person,
I love that
The
book.
Art of Seeing People Deeply and Being Deeply Seen. These people have been so instrumental in my life and my growth and what I am now as a human being, because I've been on this journey to because I was one of these people, Mary Beth. I'm not blowing smoke here or anything like that. I was no classically trained musician, and I've been good at some things over the course of my life. But one thing I was more consistent at throughout the course of my life was being angry, breaking things, and throwing, and just so my journey out of that same thing, I can relate so much to the kinds of things that you are talking about with your students and people that run around in that that classical music world that you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anything about music, but I know what it's like to be angry, and
Yeah.
I know what it's like to beat myself up, and I know what it's like to make mistakes and not know what to do with that anger.
Right. Yeah.
But I think a lot of that truly does stem from and come with our ability not only to not understand others, but also feeling like people are always talking at us, not speaking with us,
Yes.
feeling
Yes.
unseen. And I think what you're talking about here, Mary Beth, when you're talking about these students who are working for almost, or not working for, but learning from, or maybe working for within these, these orchestra groups or whatever,
Yeah.
they don't feel they're being seen for a human being. They're feeling, they are just feeling like, now I am nothing more than what I can do to perform on this cello or with this trumpet
Yes.
or with this
Yeah.
bass or with this. I am no longer a human being. I am just a part of something else, but I am insignificant.
Right.
When a person begins to feel unseen, unheard, insignificant in that
Yes.
way, they are going to act out, and most oftentimes they are going to act out with anger, and that anger stems from pain, and that pain is ugly.
Yeah.
So I think you are spot on when one of the things that you were talking to me about earlier is being able to have those interpersonal conversations.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit more about that.
Well, so speaking of like sheer anger, I can remember a lesson, and I had amazing teachers, though. I was very lucky. Where my teacher said to me, Mary Beth, you've got to practice, minimum 4 hours a day. Here are all the things you need to do. You need to do scales, arpeggios, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I'm doing it. I'm going to do it all. And so I did it every day. I did what she said, or so I thought. And the following week I go and I have my lesson, and she said, did you touch your cello? Did you even practice at all? And I had practiced I had calluses on my fingers. I had listened to I had done everything that she had said. And she said, in her opinion, I had done nothing. And I've talked to my other friends about this, and they've had lessons like this at some point in their time too. And it is the most degrading, frustrating experience where like, I sacrificed so many things for weeks and weeks, and my teacher never thought I improved. And is it the teacher's perspective? Is the student not really doing what the teacher is asking? Is the teacher trying to motivate you using a strategy to really get you to practice even more? But if I was taught skills like, okay, that's your teacher's telling you you're not improving, you have to make a decision. Did you record yourself? Did you do what she asked? Let's go back and check. Maybe she's wrong, actually. I hate to say that teacher was wrong, but maybe sometimes our teachers get it wrong. Maybe they do. Maybe once every 10 lessons, they get it wrong. And so you get to decide, do I want this to completely ruin my day and I feel dejected and then I'm going to put that to my cello playing? Or what did I learn today? Maybe I actually didn't do exactly what she asked. And so that is a skill, even when I'm having a conversation with someone about, let's just say vaccines or something, and they say something very outlandish, like, if you don't get the COVID vaccine, you hate all children. You want all children to die, right? Therefore, right. I have a feeling my heart would race and my face might turn red and my armpits might get a little sweaty. And I then get to make a decision. I can either continue the conversation or I could leave. And those little tiny moments daily could prepare me for a really, big day. Like the lesson with my teacher could be a really big dejection for me, or someone else in my family could, scream at me, and I get to decide, okay, there's no way I'm not going to have a physical reaction to stuff like that. But then I get to decide what do I get to do next? And I think if I'm taught that as a child, it could be via cello, when I make a mistake, feel that. And then what do you do after that? Right. I think that would be ideal to have that as someone in elementary school to learn that.
Right.
So
Well, and again, I'll go right back to what we said earlier. I mean, it comes down to our ability to choose our response.
yeah,
And our ability to choose our response, just like anything else, is an acquired skill.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
I would much rather see children learn that at a very young age, like you were talking about,
yeah,
than to wait until you're much older, like I did. You
yeah.
know,
Right.
uh, uh, because like I said, things just become more painful and more expensive as you get older.
Can I ask you a
So
question?
yes, ma'am.
So if you are you on social media at all?
I am not as much as I probably need to be, but with all that I do. But yeah, I am.
So you have probably been trained in this so long. Do you even get affected when you see any, Facebook post that's insane?
So that's funny that you asked that, because the reason that I started this podcast back in the day, or 4+ years ago now, was because I was one of those more toxic people that would get triggered by people saying different things, and then I would react in a poor way, and then I'd find myself in these arguments with people that I didn't know or not knowing, or fooling myself into believing that I was somehow going to maybe change their mind, but the reality was it was going to accomplish nothing.
Yeah.
Um, you know, figuring out that is a huge time suck. It's a big waste of time.
Yeah.
To allow yourself not only to get triggered by something that may or may not be true anyway, from somebody that I do not know,
Right.
that has no true impact on my life.
Right.
So that is an acquired skill.
Yeah.
That is an acquired skill.
I just feel like Facebook is a great way to practice. You see,
Well,
you
there
look
is
at that.
that.
Okay, wow. Oh, I feel my emotions rising. Someone just said the earth is flat. What do I do with that? Okay. All right. Am I annoyed by that? Okay. I'm noticing my annoyance. Let's see what's next.
Right. No, that is a phenomenal. Which actually segues in. I know we're right here at the end of our time, Mary Beth, but I do want to. So I want to take this to a little bit different level, in the sense that, this has been a phenomenal awareness piece. I mean, like I said, the classical music industry, if you want to call it that, or the classical music space, or whatever, is a huge blind spot for me. And I would have never guessed that there is so much pain and toxicity there, but it does run parallel to so many other things that people are experiencing in their lives. So I'll go back to one thing that I say quite often is, we do not know what any individual, we can never truly know what any individual is going through in their personal life, what storm they're going into, what storm they're coming out of, what storm they're currently experiencing. So it should be everybody's default position to just be kind.
Yeah.
But Mary Beth, what I want to do is I want to ask you just real quick to finish out our conversation here. What is an action item, or maybe a couple quick action items that you think people could really do? I know you've continued to go back to the idea of young children and how to prepare young children for, especially if the child is, but it doesn't have to be, but especially if the child has got some of the qualities of maybe a child prodigy that's going to be in the realm of music, and maybe classical music or whatever. Mm-hmm. What are some action items that you think parents can use, people can use, teachers can use to better prepare those students for what they are inevitably going to experience as they travel down this road?
Something I have done with students who go off to school that is kind of serious as I role play potential future situations where conversations could happen, where it could get really nasty and feelings could be so obliterated and affected and hurt to a point where you'd want to quit. And modeling how to respond and practicing that with them, and not just letting them say, okay, do your best, keep a good attitude, don't get angry. But literally, I did the Mind the Gap at Braver Angels, and I thought that theatrically using theater to illustrate how to have conversations is genius. And I think practicing these potential upcoming situations or concerts or auditions in advance of it happening and saying, okay, what's the best way to respond when you start to get upset? Because that's inevitable in this field. You're going to lose an audition. Someone's going to say something bad about your playing. And if they know that that's going to, potentially happen, they've got the tools to really deal with their emotions. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, I think that's phenomenal. I think about the phrase muscle memory or whatever. And I know muscle memory is very important I don't care whether you're talking about music or you're talking about shooting or you're talking about so many things in our life, especially something that we want to be good at. Depends on muscle memory. And just like everything else, muscle memory comes from practice. And I think I believe it's beautiful, the idea of role playing, and how are we going to deal with this if this is to happen? Prepare people.
I was just going to say one other thing. All my students give a recital every semester, twice a year, and actually before they perform their piece, I go in there and I try to distract them. I'll play sounds on the piano, I'll clap, I'll dance around them so that they can practice knowing that they might make a mistake and how they're going to respond to it. I also try to make it funny too. I do funny dance moves. So I want them to practice feeling distracted, but trying to stay focused anyways. So just musically speaking, that's one way that I do that. But, communication wise, we could do a practice run through of, a really terrible conversation and how you deal with it.
No, absolutely. Well, I tell you what, Mary Beth, whether it's playing a classical instrument or having a conversation or trying to regulate our emotions in uncomfortable situations or any of this, all of those things take practice. And the more we do them, the better we become at them. The more we have true interpersonal interaction with other human beings and really get out there and ask questions. The best way to be seen is to see the person that you're speaking with. Mm-hmm. If they feel seen, they are more inclined to see you for the human being and the humanity within you. I've loved this conversation. It's been a great awareness piece for me. I'm sure it's going to be a great awareness piece for the DTH listeners. Mary Beth Bryant, thank you so much for joining me on the D-Rate the Hate podcast. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends, share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the D-Rate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.